Hey everybody, what is up? My name is Liam Angel, aka Straight Shooting LJA, and welcome to another LE Bikes opinion piece. Now, this is kind of a tough subject to discuss because electric bike batteries specifically have been hitting the headlines for all the wrong reasons recently. We've seen fires here in England, and we've seen where a father was killed, and we've also seen an electric bike related fire in New York at an e-bike shop. And understandably, there is a lot of fear currently about electric bike batteries. But also as well, there's been a lot of wrongful demonizing of electric bike batteries. And all of them have been kind of lumped into the same category, which to me is not fair. And a lot of these reports on e-bike fires and the deaths resulting from them have been agenda-based, parasitic to an extent, because all they've focused on is the aftermath, which has been tragic, and I'm not trying to get away from that. But there's always been a lack of context, and that's one of the things that really gets me irked, because a lack of context is basically reporting something with a lack of context is nothing more than essentially fear-mongering, propaganda spreading. That's all it really is. And there's a lot of people who, it seems like, because they can't profit from or make money from e-bikes or e-bike batteries or anything like that, they're jumping on the bandwagon and demonizing them. And a lot of us e-bike riders, I am one, I have 2 electric bikes, about 4 batteries between the 2 of them, and I've always been careful how I charge my batteries, make sure I use the original charger, make sure I use the right charger. And that is generally context that is left out. That some e-bike riders are maybe a bit irresponsible with the way they charge their bikes. Some of them are using old chargers, some of them are using some of them have worn out connections on the batteries, and the littlest spark starts a fire. And e-bike batteries, like any lithium ion battery, like a battery in your laptop, like a battery in your phone, if subjected to negative conditions, so extreme heat, extreme cold, and especially damp and or water, they are essentially, and I don't want to embellish by saying it, but ticking time bombs to an extent. And there are a lot of, and I'm not trying to demonize delivery drivers, but there are a lot of delivery drivers you will see out there on these overpowered electric bikes. 1,000 watts, 2,000 watts, 3,000 watts. Then you've got the Surons as well, and it's like, hold on a minute. In terms of e-bike safety, you can't have something that weighs like 50 kilograms plus a rider that probably weighs twice that, if not 2/3 of that, and on top, and then you've got brakes on them that are designed for regular bikes. You can't have all of that plus an overpowered motor and a massive battery. And some of these batteries that I've seen have been wrapped in nothing more than cling film. I have literally seen with my own eyes an electric bike cycling in the rain with nothing but cling film around it, holding it to the crossbar and the downtube. And I'm thinking, wow. It's like any drop of water in that, boom, gone. And it's like, I'm just thinking to myself, as a conscious decision, how can you ride a bike like that? Now, I understand that a lot of people do delivery jobs to make ends meet. Not criticizing that at all. But when you've got a bike like that, if I owned the building, I'd be like, that is not coming into my building because it looks unsafe. So then imagine that being left on a bike, charging, and say there's a damaged BMS because water has gotten into it. That's risking a fire. And a lot of these e-bike batteries that are catching fire, more often than not, will be cheap ones. Just like a lot of rear hub motors are on cheaper bikes. So if you're getting an electric bike for say 300-400 quid, you gotta look at they're cutting corners somewhere. To give you that good a price, especially the fact that it's from China, so it has to be imported in, there's prices associated with that. There's no getting around that. And you're getting it for 300-400 quid, whether it be brand new or secondhand. You've really got to think to yourself, corners are being cut, and more often than not, it's safety that is being put at risk, and that's the corners being cut. So the BMS might not be correct for that battery. The charger might be susceptible to damage, or it might even be half damaged. And all of these factors come into, or should come into people's minds when buying an electric bike and when buying a replacement battery. If everywhere else is selling something for 400-500 quid, say a 48 volt 17 amp battery is going for 500 quid everywhere else, and there's one place selling it for 250-260 quid brand new, you do have to think something's rotten in Denmark. Like, something is not right here. Some corners are being cut. That battery can't possibly, for that price, be as good as a battery that's more expensive. It can't be. Then you've got to look into the warranty. You've got to look where it's coming from as well. And it's a case of, with a lot of these cheaper end e-bikes, yes, it's easy to find them, and the proliferation of them is huge. But even those selling those bikes potentially don't know where they're coming from, and there's a danger too. Not having direct suppliers. Like, there will be a lot of people selling electric bikes who won't know their suppliers, who will have never had email contact, will have never had face-to-face or phone contact. None of those three things with their suppliers at any juncture. And it's like, that's not a good way of going about things. It really isn't. Because at the end of the day, that means that there is no accountability. And most people selling electric bikes who you can't look up on Company's House because there is no company there, how are you gonna catch them and maybe get compensation or hold them to account or get the name of their suppliers? How are you ever going to do that? So it's all about trusting reputable companies who A, know what they're doing, and B, know their suppliers and have a relationship with their suppliers, and a regular one. Because there have been a lot of times where I've spoken to people. I worked in an electric bike shop for about a year and a half. Spoke to a lot of people who came in and were like, oh yeah, I tried to get replacement parts, but either the supplier or the place they bought it from is like, well, they're not answering emails, or they've just disappeared, or they'll answer an email once every 3 to 4 months, or I've had to send it all the way back to China to get my stuff replaced. And it's like, no. And it's like 6 weeks later, you ain't heard anything from them. And it's like, no, it's not good. So you have to be wary as to where you're getting your electric bikes and equipment from. And also as well, you have to be wary of the design of them. You do have to an extent, even with the upper echelon batteries like the LG and Samsung cells, you do still have to be very careful how you charge your battery. You got to charge it in a nice room temperature. You can't be charging it in damp conditions. You can't be letting water get into the connections. It's things like that that can contribute to your battery degrading or even becoming a fire risk. It's like taking your battery off when charging it. Always advise that. We would always advise taking your battery off your bike to charge it. Making sure that you're not keeping your bike and or battery outside in sub-zero conditions or extreme heat. So during a heat wave, don't leave it in direct sunlight. Those kind of things. We're doing a series called E-Bikes Tips and Tricks. We'll be getting onto that stuff as we go along. We've been talking about security so far. And it's a case of like there are a lot of batteries that are fine and will never have an issue. But also you've also got to look at the age of your battery as well. How many cycles has it done in terms of how many charges? The average e-bike battery has 500 to 1,000 charges in it. So if you're going over that amount, then it might be time to replace your battery. Like some say every 2 to 3 years you should be replacing your battery, dependent on use. So everything has an expiry date. So that's something to be mindful of as well. So just like you check your brakes, just like you check your wheels, for instance, if they're quick release, you need to be that vigilant with your e-bike battery as well. So for me, there's a lot of fear mongering, and as said, most of it, there is no context. There is never any information on, what were the charging conditions? What conditions was the bike kept in? What conditions were the battery or batteries kept in? What's the state of the charger? How long had they had the charger for? Were they using a charger with the correct voltage? That is key. And that's something that a lot of people, I don't think, realize even now that e-bikes have been around for a few years. Make sure you've got the right charger. Not just, a 3-pin to 3-pin or XLR to XLR. It's one of them was you got to make sure it's the right voltage. Don't use a 54 volt charger on a 36 volt battery. No, there's too much current going through. You're potentially going to overload it, destroy the BMS battery management system, and destroy any sort of safety cutouts on it. So it is one of them, as I said, it is somewhat of a difficult conversation and a difficult subject to talk about because people have died from e-bike fires. And I said, I'm not taking anything away from that, not in the least. But if you're going to talk and blame e-bike batteries for these fires, it's like you have to add the context and you have to add the questions. You have to ask the questions. How were they stored? How were they charged? How often were they used? Were they left out in less than ideal conditions? And also the bike, the connectors on the bike, what were they like? Was there rust? Was there condensation? Was there erosion on the connectors? All of these things factor in to potentially sparking an e-bike fire. Was the battery left overnight unsupervised? Was it in a fireproof battery bag? All of these things. And as I said, the media will always go the lazy way about it. There has been a lot of demonization of converted bikes. I actually read an article a couple of days ago, as I record this, about demonizing converted electric bikes. So regular bikes that have been converted into electric bikes. And I disagree with that. Of course, I'm going to disagree with it because of part of what we do at LE Bikes is converting regular bikes into electric bikes. But if it's done properly, not by a cowboy builder, then you can always trace back that accountability. You can always trace it back to a legitimate company that you can find on Company's House, not just some 2-bit J-Bro down the road who's done it for you for 200 quid. It's like, again, as I said before, if something's very, very cheap or extremely cheap in comparison to everybody else, you got to look at where corners are being cut. You really do. So like, before you purchase an electric bike, you got to look at stuff like, are they an official supplier and distributor? Have they got a relationship with the suppliers? And also as well, can you find that company on Companies House? If you're here in the UK, can you find them on Companies House? Can you find out more information about them? Are they at the end of a phone or very easily accessible via email or website or whatever? If not, then you might have to start thinking, well, bells are ringing. It's like alarm bells are ringing. It's like, can you speak to someone about the issue with your electric bike? Can you speak to someone for advice about e-bikes? If you can't, maybe it's not worth your money and not worth the risk buying from them. There's something as well. Because as I said, if your stuff is converted and it's done well and it's done right, then there should really be no worries. You should have peace of mind that your stuff's not going to blow up. It's like you should have peace of mind that a wheel's not going to fall off, or the motor's not going to, mid-drive motor, for instance, is not going to fall off whilst you're riding. So it is one of them, was the demonization, I said, of converted bikes. It depends. A lot of people do DIY on their bikes. Some people are selling them on. Some people are just doing it for themselves. If you're doing it for yourselves, cool. If you're doing it for someone else, you need to make sure you've done stuff the right way. Sit under the learning tree of someone who's done it for a while and learn the correct ways of doing it. Because if you don't, you're putting yourself at risk, but more importantly, you're putting whoever is buying that bike from you at risk. One thing, just finally, there has been talk of e-bike regulation and safety regulation, like with other electric devices. I am in total favor of it. Total favor of regulating it. Because if you regulate e-bikes and e-bike batteries in terms of the electrical side and the components used, and making sure that safety standards have to be adhered to, strict European and British safety standards, then you lessen the chance of cheap batteries slipping through the net. Cheap crap batteries, it must be said, slipping through the net. So I'm in favor of regulation. Now, you may see prices of batteries jump up a bit, but it's worth it for that peace of mind and for that safety. I definitely am an advocate of regulation, but it has to be proper regulation, not regulation where you can have a few things slip through the net. No, it has to be very rigid, and it has to be adhered to by e-bike companies, battery manufacturers, among others. Factory spot checks every quarter. It's like those kind of things there. You make sure that the environment these things are being produced in is sound. Then you make sure that safety is adhered to because the necessary checks are being carried out. So it is one of them ones. That's my take on it. But you know what? lebikes.co.uk is our website. Check out our range of electric bikes. Also, as well, we convert bikes into electric bikes as well. Check out our prices, check out our conversions, custom builds. We've got Engwe electric bikes, Himiway as well. We are official suppliers and distributors for Engwe and Himiway long range bikes, e-bikes as well. We are on Twitter, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook at LE-Bikes. We are on YouTube, youtube.com/@LE-Bikes as well. You know what? Wherever you are on the socials, you can find us too. Just search us, search LE-Bikes. You know what? I said, I have been Liam Angel, aka Straight Shooting LJA. And you know what? Until next time, take care and stay safe, everyone.